Hey everybody, it's Angie. I'll let a couple people join us really quick. I wanted to just hop on because yesterday during my live stream for Monday at 3 o'clock, the video got cut off about halfway through, but there's some really important stuff that I wanted to share with you. So I'm back today to do part 2 of my video from yesterday titled Cute Beach Birds and Skyward Explosions, which is pretty timely. I mentioned yesterday, if you haven't seen the video from yesterday, go check it out. It's under our videos tab here on Facebook, and then hop back over to this video and watch it after. Hey, I see some people from yesterday joining us again. Thanks for being here. Hey, Steve. So yesterday, like I said, I was doing a video out on a beautiful beach down below Table Bluff up here in Northern California, talking about snowy plovers. I was located on the south spit of the Humboldt Bay, sort of, kind of to the south of the jetty or the harbor mouth of the Humboldt Bay. And I was talking about a really special bird. And let's see, I brought my, oh no. Okay, we've got some wind. Ah! Alrighty, hang in there, everyone. Let me get you set up. Don't have my tripod today. This is truly impromptu. Okay, so I was talking about these little animals right here called the snowy plovers. And if you live in California or you live on the North Coast, maybe you've heard of these birds before. And yesterday I went ahead and showed you a model or a sample sort of what their nest looks like. So I asked you to picture a bird's nest, maybe one that you've seen before, and I'm probably picturing sort of like a woven basket, woven by a bird, maybe high up in a tree. But these nests for snowy plovers are located really just on the ground, on a big stretch of beach near dunes, near dune ecosystems. So I have a little sample here. I'm gonna make sure that you guys don't fall down again while I set it up. So just give me a moment. Essentially, these nests are made in a depression in the sand on the beach. So I have it here. Oopsie, let's see if I can do this. So they're pretty hard to spot. This is just a model, of course, with some plover eggs in the center. And you can imagine if you're walking on a long stretch of beach, I'm not at the beach today, but if you go back to the video from yesterday, you'll see sort of the habitat where they live. And if you're walking or driving or anything along a long stretch of beach, you can imagine that it would be really hard to tell where these nests are. These eggs are about this big, so they're pretty small. And I'll go ahead and show you a picture again of a papa plover, a father plover, taking care of a cute little chick on the beach. So they are really cute beach birds, hence the name of our video. And I wanted to talk about how they, because of this format which they make their nests on sandy beach environments and in dune environments where people love to visit, including myself, they're pretty vulnerable to various things. So if you can imagine, I want you to picture if you have maybe a pet at home or a dog and yourselves, right? So we have our home system, we have 4 walls around us and hopefully a roof over our heads, and we're able to kind of shelter ourselves from weather, from maybe our versions of predators, and kind of protect ourselves. We're a little less vulnerable maybe when we're in our houses, right? And for the plovers, their house is a very vulnerable environment where there's lots of weather, lots of wind, and they're really exposed to all of those things, exposed to predators, right? So plovers are, like all animals in the animal kingdom, susceptible to predators, right? Whether those are natural or introduced predators. But plovers are predated upon by ravens and crows pretty often. And I'll talk a little bit more about how that comes into play. So that's one of the things that is a threat to the plovers. Another thing is habitat loss or destruction. So of course, like coastal development could threaten the plovers. And I mentioned yesterday sort of what their range is. So again, go back and check out that video if you are curious about all of that. And the third threat that I want to talk about is human disturbance. And that specifically relates to something that's coming up this weekend, where we have these Skyward explosions happening. So you can probably guess that I'm talking about the 4th of July. So I want to talk about a few different things when it comes to human disturbance and plovers. So I live close to the beach that I was on yesterday, actually. And that's a place where, you know, in Humboldt County, on the north coast of California, we have these long stretches of sandy beaches, and people like to do various types of recreation on the beach. So people like to bring their dogs there, and if you have a dog and maybe they've been cooped up inside a lot lately, you'll know that when you go to a big field or the dog park or to the beach, they just want to run as far as they can, as fast as they can, all over the place. And so the dunes are no exclusion from that. Dogs love to run through the dunes, and it's a joy to watch your dog sort of have the time of their life in a natural space. But unfortunately, dogs can be perceived by many wildlife as their predators. Although maybe your dog isn't necessarily after all the wildlife, but they can serve as this sort of fear-inducing stimulus to the environment, right? So something that can scare off wildlife. And when dogs are running through the dune environment, they can really disturb the plovers. So if, for example, there is a papa plover who's sitting on their little chicks to keep them warm, so they basically have to sit on them to keep the babies warm, especially maybe at night and when it's cold. And if the father is startled and kind of gets up and runs away and tries to gather the chicks and get them to go to shelter, if you will, that uses a lot of their energy, right? And it's something called metabolic cost. So we basically have a certain amount of energy, a fixed amount of energy in a day, and specifically for wildlife, how they spend that is really important. So they basically have a tight budget, right? And the same principle applies to many different types of wildlife, if not all of them. Maybe there's some wildlife biologists out there who are listening. So that's one thing when it comes to dogs. So really important to know about the beach you're going to and what the regulations are about dogs. Up here on the North Coast, we have lots of amazing beaches, and many of them have different rules or guidelines of what you can do with your dogs there, right? And there's a really great brochure that I have, and I'll find a way to share that. Maybe I'll take a photo and snap it in the comments for you all. But that's a little bit about dogs. Another thing that people like to do on our beaches and on beaches in all of California where it's allowed is use off-highway vehicles. So maybe bringing your vehicle or even just your normal four-wheel drive car out onto the beach. And of course, like I mentioned before, spotting this little nest can be difficult even if you're just a human walking along the beach, right? They're very well camouflaged and they're very small. They blend into the environment. So if you're driving a car, it would be extremely hard to tell where one of these nests is, right? So some of our biologists at state parks who are surveying plovers have actually found tire tracks of cars that have gone right next to, maybe like inches next to a plover nest. So of course that would be very startling and would cost the plovers some energy, right, to get away from that dangerous situation. And in some cases, cars have even run over plover nests. So important to know, if you do drive your vehicle on the beach, maybe go a little down towards the wet sand, because our plovers are mostly hanging out and nesting up on the dry sand. And many times when plovers are identified, we'll put up symbolic fencing or something that tells people, hey, there's plovers here. Can be a pretty large area. So wanting to just avoid that area. And then the main thing that I really want to talk about today when it comes to those Skyward explosions is just any overhead activity, right? So if you're an animal trying to survive out in this big bad world we live in, especially plovers, all of their predators are coming from above, right? So remember those ravens and those crows, they are constantly sort of tracking what's going on above them so they can try and protect themselves or run away, right? And there's something coming up this weekend on Saturday that I'm sure many of you are excited about, and that is 4th of July. And on 4th of July, there are generally lots of exciting festivities going on. Might look a little bit different this year, but generally there are lots of fireworks happening on 4th of July. Maybe, I know I went to a lot of fireworks shows growing up and even into my adulthood, and they're always really fun for kids and for all of us, really, to sort of see this visual celebration in the sky. And something that came to my attention recently as I was starting to learn about plovers is that this overhead activity can end up costing the plovers a lot of that energy budget that they have. And whether it's just the bright lights shining in the sky or the really loud sounds, those can be really startling for wildlife, including plovers and many other types of wildlife. So I always like to think of, if you have a dog at home, I have a dog, his name is Boo, shout out to my dog Boo. I know that when there are fireworks going on in my neighborhood, I look at my dog's face and I see this very tangible sense of anxiety and fear and just sort of like, what is going on? I kind of want to hide, I want to run away. And we can really relate to that if you have a pet and you've experienced them experiencing that. You might be worried about them or be sad that they're feeling that way. And the same happens to our wildlife, right? But for our dogs, for example, they're in our homes, they're safe for the most part, they have food and water, they have shelter, they have a couch maybe they can hide under. But for plovers, for example, they're really exposed, remember, in that vulnerable habitat. So that added sort of stress can have a really negative impact on wildlife, including plovers. So fireworks, the overhead sort of stimulus is a little bit stressful, as well as the sound, and just things kind of shooting out from the ground or landing near their nests and burning and things like that can be pretty stressful. I think we can all relate to that experience of maybe an intense situation happening around us. And another thing that I learned about recently when studying plovers is that even frisbees, so if you go to the beach to play frisbee and a frisbee is flying over the nest of a plover, they can also be stressed by that overhead stimulus. So I keep using that word, overhead stimulus, or those two words. And those are things that I've learned to consider now when I go to the beach during the month, between the months of March and September. So we're basically right in the middle of their brooding, their nesting time, right? So these papa plovers are hanging out on the beach, and they are constantly balancing that checkbook of energy cost that they have to use every day in order to keep their babies alive, keep themselves alive, so that hopefully those little ones can grow up and reproduce too. So some good news, our biologists have recently found some plover chicks on one of our local beaches, so that's really awesome and great news because they are an endangered species. But I want to just talk about one last thing that comes into that category of human disturbance, and that is litter. So I'm sure that many of you, after the 4th of July, maybe on July 5th, go out for a walk outdoors, and it's not uncommon to see a lot of litter left behind from fireworks shows or from people using even just little handheld fireworks like sparklers. I know on the 1st of this year, I went out and saw a lot of firework debris that was used on New Year's Eve, right? So one other thing about the litter that directly impacts the plovers is that those crows and ravens, they actually get attracted to food wrappers or kind of bright or shiny things that are on the beach, because they basically learned that oftentimes that means maybe left behind food from humans. So if they're attracted to the beach because of that litter, and then, you know, in the corner of their eye they see a plover moving, that plover is basically in direct threat of being eaten by those predators. So it's all sort of connected, and I think it's timely. I wanted to get this out before 4th of July because I know for me this has kind of shifted my perspective of how to celebrate responsibly for 4th of July, keeping in mind that there's these super cute animals that rely on our beaches. And in state parks, there's no fireworks allowed on our beaches, but there are parks there are beaches where fireworks are allowed. So consider sort of the cost versus benefit maybe to you, and maybe consider doing your fireworks in a place where you know plovers aren't going to be. So remember that sort of long beach, sandy beach environment near the dunes, and always, always, always keep it crumb clean. Never leave any food behind, and never leave any trash behind, especially when you're visiting our parks. Not even especially, just all the time. Make sure to clean up after yourself and leave this world a little bit cleaner than you found it. So I hope that for those of you that got the half version of this program yesterday are able to tune in and get some follow-up information and relate this back to our lives right now, because of course 4th of July is coming up, and I truly hope everyone is doing well. Thanks so much for tuning in. As you know, we are doing these live streams every day at 3. This is sort of an impromptu follow-up live stream because of poor connection yesterday. But tune in today at 3 o'clock. You'll be hearing from Kyle, I believe, and lots of my other coworkers for the rest of the week. So thanks for being here, and we appreciate you, and we'll see you soon.